There's a moment, subtle, almost hidden, when you realize you didn't simply arrive here by chance. Something older than thought, quieter than memory, has been guiding you to this point. Tonight, I invite you to set down the noise, take a deep breath, and notice where you are. Are you listening from a warm room? A quiet bed? Somewhere between sleep and waking? However you've arrived, you're here, and that matters. This is a story about remembering what you've never truly forgotten, about the strange way reality bends to the frequency you carry, about the soft scaffolding behind the events we call coincidence. Together, we'll step gently into that space where awareness listens to itself, where synchronicity isn't a visitor, but something you create, simply by being so settled in. Subscribe so we can meet here again. Let's begin. You didn't land here randomly. This moment, yes, this one right now, has been softly threading its way to you through a series of whispers. Not loud ones, not the kind that shout through events or scream through circumstance. These were the quieter sorts of signals, the feeling you couldn't name that sat in your chest at 3:17 a.m., the pull you felt when your hand hovered over a book spine you didn't intend to touch, the unexplainable pause when someone said something that echoed louder than the words themselves. That was the signal, not out there, but from within, beginning to glow. Something in you was always listening, even when your mind was racing, even when your body was busy performing its rehearsed routines. There was a hum, a soft frequency you couldn't quite identify, but couldn't shake either. And now you're here. Not because you were searching, but because a deeper part of you finally aligned with the doorway dot. What if you're not discovering anything new? What if you're remembering something ancient? There's a rhythm beneath all rhythms, a vibration more honest than words, and it's not being taught to you. It's being remembered through you. The strange sense of familiarity you feel right now, that's the memory waking. Your consciousness isn't learning. It's returning. You are not a vessel waiting to be filled. You are a tuning fork that has begun to resonate with the tone you are always made from. The stillness that seems to bloom inside your ribcage right now, that's coherence. That's you aligning, not with these words, but with the place these words are coming from. You've reached a moment your higher self planted long ago, and it's just beginning. Let's say something radical, softly. You are not a recipient of synchronicity. You are its architect. You are not watching life unfold in a series of odd coincidences. You are the vibration that causes those coincidences to cluster. When the pattern seems too perfect to explain, that's not magic arriving. That's your signal finally rising above the static. You are not the audience of the universe's grand show. You are the projector, the energy that stirs within. Your breath, your attention, your willingness to feel fully, that's what pulls the threads into design. Reality listens not to what you say, but to what you are. And the more honestly you allow yourself to feel, even the sharp, raw, unwanted parts, the more clearly you emit that signal. That's when life begins to reflect you, not to test you, to mirror you. There's more to you than the surface that speaks and walks and reasons. Beneath that, another self is resting, not asleep, but in stillness. It doesn't use words. It doesn't respond to urgency. It simply is. That self exists in what quantum physics might call the zero-point field, a realm where all outcomes exist simultaneously, waiting for your resonance to shape them. In that field, time doesn't pass, it folds. Moments don't come and go. They overlap. You are living many timelines, and the one you tune into with your deepest awareness, not your panic, not your logic, but your coherence, is the one that blooms around you. You don't manifest from craving. You manifest from clarity. And clarity only arrives when presence is allowed to deepen into silence. Now pause, just for a moment. Feel the shift? That quiet click inside, as if something just settled? That's not imagination. That's alignment. Your body may call it relaxation. Your mind may call it calm. But the deeper truth is, your field just remembered its own design. The signal you forgot you were sending has returned to its source. You're not just reading, you're recognizing. And the recognition is happening below thought, in the architecture of your being. That's what remembering feels like when it comes through resonance, not reason. You're not learning, you're returning. Consider this. Every time you felt like you were waiting for a sign, what if you were the one emitting it? What if the longing for clarity wasn't a request for something new, but an echo of something already planted in your future, calling you home? You are not moving toward answers. You are unraveling the noise that blocked you from hearing the answers already living inside you. The sensation of déjà vu, the goosebumps at odd times, the dreams that repeat, these are not random. They're breadcrumbs left by your own higher intelligence. They're not meant to tell you what to do, only to remind you that you already know. But here's where many people get stuck. They think realization is the goal. They chase aha moments. They treat insight like currency, as if accumulating enough will finally unlock the life they want. But awakening isn't a collection. It's a surrender. You can't force truth to land. You can only make yourself spacious enough to receive it. That's why effort often contracts the field. But softness, the willingness to not push, to simply feel, that opens the portal. Awakening doesn't happen through striving. It happens through coherence, through remembering that you are not here to extract meaning. You are the meaning. Let's walk slower now. Let's talk about the texture of reality. What you call life is not made of events, but of interpretation. And interpretation is filtered through resonance. Two people can live the same moment, and emerge with opposite truths. Why? Because truth isn't delivered from outside. It's translated through frequency. If your frequency is fear, you'll see threat. If your frequency is presence, you'll see pattern. That doesn't mean you fake positivity. It means you sit with your actual frequency, even if it's grief, and you don't abandon it. Because the moment you stay with your actual feeling without judgment, the frequency begins to transform, not by force, by presence. That's the real alchemy. So what does this mean in daily life? It means when something strange happens, like a song playing just as you were thinking about a memory, or a stranger saying the exact words you needed. Don't ask, is this a sign? Instead ask, what part of me just came into coherence? Because the universe doesn't send you signs as rewards. It reflects your state of resonance. You are not being tested. You are being mirrored. And the mirror sharpens when you slow down and listen. There's something gentle I want to remind you of now. You are allowed to stop seeking. Not because there's nothing left to find, but because you're already living inside the field where truth lives. You are not on the outside of the mystery. You are the mystery, waking up to itself. Every time you allow yourself to pause and feel without rushing, you return to the place where magic isn't rare. It's your natural state. The more you breathe with presence, the more the field organizes around you. That's not mysticism. That's resonance science. And yet, don't be tricked into thinking this awareness is meant to make life neat. Coherence doesn't mean comfort. It means honesty. Sometimes awakening breaks things open. Sometimes remembering shakes you loose from the old scaffolding. But don't mistake collapse for failure. Often, it's the structure of false self that is falling, making room for the real you to emerge, not in perfection, but in presence. And that presence? That's what shifts worlds, quietly. Relentlessly. Now feel into this moment. Let it widen. Ask yourself, gently, with no pressure, What would change if I lived as if my frequency is the sculptor of reality? What choices would soften? What fears would loosen their grip? What version of me is already walking the timeline I ache for? And how can I align with them now? Not by doing more, but by being more truly myself. That question, held gently, will open the next door, because the field is listening. And more than that, it's responding. Let's go further, not in distance, but in depth. Imagine that consciousness is not confined to your brain, not housed in the folds of gray matter, but instead exists as a field, vast, responsive, alive. You're not thinking in your mind. You are thinking through a field, a frequency, a wave pattern that is constantly in dialogue with everything else. And here's the strange, quiet truth most overlook. This field does not speak in language. It speaks in resonance. So when you feel that unnameable pull, that quiet yes in your chest, that's not your imagination. That's information arriving in its purest form. And every time you allow that pulse to matter, even without proof, you sharpen your access to it, that the modern world teaches us to favor evidence. It rewards reason and punishes mystery. But reality, the real kind, beneath the appearances, doesn't bend to logic. It bends to awareness. It bends to the tone you emit when no one is watching. That's why some people walk into a room and shift its energy without saying a word. That's why two people can say the same sentence and only one of them lands in your soul. It's not what they say. It's who they are while saying it. Coherence carries farther than charisma. Presence echoes louder than performance. So if you've ever felt invisible, unheard, unnoticed, maybe it wasn't you that was broken. Maybe you were just waiting to become coherent. And coherence doesn't mean calm. It doesn't mean tidy. A wildfire can be coherent. So can a birth, or a breakdown, or a raw confession. Coherence means aligned with truth, with frequency, with the version of you that doesn't need to pretend. You're not becoming more spiritual when you hide your anger. You're not getting closer to awakening when you skip over your sadness. You are not here to transcend your human messagnes. You are here to be so fully honest in it that the divine recognizes itself in your tears. That is the medicine. Not bypassing the pain, but witnessing it without abandoning yourself. Now take a breath. Not a big one, a soft one. Let it come in gently. Let it remind you that the breath is the bridge between thoughts and presence, between resistance and trust. Every inhale is an entry point into now, and now is where all power lives. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to know what happens next. You only need to remember that your presence is the most potent instrument you have. The more honestly you inhabit this breath, the more aligned the next moment becomes. Not because you controlled it, but because you tuned to it. That's why chasing signs can be misleading. When you look too hard for meaning, you start reading noise as signal. But when you become still enough to feel, the real signals, the ones meant for you, rise naturally. A phrase in a stranger's voice, a pattern of numbers on a receipt, a breeze that hits your skin just as you think of someone long gone. These are not decorations. They are harmonics. They are your own coherence, echoing back through the field in symbolic form. And they always appear when you're not forcing, when you're listening. Here's something soft but sharp. Life is not testing you. It's mirroring your vibration. And that's both beautiful and uncomfortable, because it means we're not victims of circumstance. We are co-creators, not with total control, but with deep influence. Every time you choose presence over panic, every time you allow wonder to rise instead of collapsing into fear, the pattern around you adjusts. Maybe not instantly, maybe not visibly, but absolutely, inevitably. Energy does not lie. And your energy is speaking even when your lips are still. Let's revisit that idea. That's quietly been following us. The you that exists beneath the surface is still there. The origin point self. It knows things your conscious mind can't explain. It speaks in symbols, sensations, synchronicities. It doesn't argue. It doesn't push. It waits. Waits for you to get quiet enough to hear its signal beneath the static. And when you do, when you drop beneath the chatter, it's like stepping into a different gravity. Everything slows down, not in a sleepy way, in a sacred way. The ordinary becomes charged. Time becomes fluid. And every choice starts to feel like a thread you're pulling on in a tapestry. You're only just beginning to see this is not imagination. This is perception sharpening. When you begin to sense the interconnectedness of everything, not just as a concept, but as a lived experience, you stop needing proof. You stop needing to explain. You start living the knowing. That's the shift from idea to embodiment, from spiritual hobby to sacred presence. And the more you live this way, the more reality starts to feel less like something happening to you and more like something happening with you. But here's a gentle warning. When this awareness begins to rise, the mind will try to co-opt it. It will say, now I know how to get what I want. And just like that, the ego turns resonance into strategy. It starts to use insight as leverage. It begins to ask, if I feel good, will I attract better things? But that's a trap, because the field doesn't respond to performance. It responds to truth. If you're faking clarity to get a better outcome, you're broadcasting distortion. And distortion brings chaos, not as punishment, but as a mirror. So don't force coherence. Let it emerge. Not by controlling your emotions, but by honoring them. Even the ugly ones. Especially the ugly ones. They hold the codes. So let's reframe. Instead of trying to attract things, ask yourself, what am I being invited to embody right now? Maybe it's honesty. Maybe it's softness. Maybe it's trust. The field responds not to your demands, but to your devotion, to being who you actually are, even when it's uncomfortable. The more you show up with your whole self, the more life meets you in strange and beautiful ways. You stop needing signs because your life becomes the sign. And now, something subtle. When someone enters your life and shifts your awareness, not with advice, but with presence, notice that. That's not just chemistry. That's coherence linking up. That's your field finding its resonance in another. And sometimes, that person doesn't stay. Sometimes they leave just after the light enters. But that's okay. They weren't the source. They were the mirror. And what they reflected was already inside. You let that sink in. You don't need to hold on to the mirror. You only need to remember what it showed you. And in that remembrance, you begin to radiate, not with effort, with alignment. People start saying things like, you feel different. And you won't need to explain, because the shift isn't for them. It's for the field. You're not here to convince. You're here to cohere, to live in such honest alignment that others feel their own illusions beginning to crack. Not because you told them how to change, but because your presence reminded them it's possible. That's the work. Not louder, not faster, but truer. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to become a light all at once. You only need to stay with yourself, especially when you want to leave, especially when the pain rises or the doubt claws at your ribs. That's the initiation. That's the threshold. And if you stay, if you breathe and witness and soften instead of running, something opens, slowly, gently, but unmistakably. And from that opening, light begins to leak out. Not in a burst, but in waves. So let's end this part with a question. What if you are not here to find the path, but to become it? What if every breath you take in coherence is recalibrating not just your life, but the lives of those entangled with you, lovers, strangers, ancestors, descendants, all quietly affected by the tone you carry? What if this is not just your awakening, but the awakening of the web itself, and you are its tuning fork? You're still here, and that matters. It means something has been resonating, not just in your thoughts, but in that deeper, quieter field beneath them. That place where understanding doesn't arrive through logic, but through vibration. So let's keep walking, not forward, but inward. Because what you're really doing isn't a journey through ideas. It's a slow remembering of the deeper self, the self that never forgot, the self that never left. And the more you walk toward it, the more life begins to echo it, not with grand events or loud fireworks, but with soft alignments, subtle confirmations, a light in someone's eyes, a message at the right moment, a stillness that feels more honest than any answer. The more present you become, the more you notice the strange phenomena that accompany awakening. Like the way animals start to notice you, the way children stare a little longer, the way you catch numbers repeating without trying, or how people start opening their hearts to you without knowing why. This isn't coincidence. It's field coherence. You're emitting a signal now, and that signal is attracting the forms that match it. Not because you're manipulating reality, but because you're embodying truth. And truth rearranges the field without effort. This is why the most powerful awakenings feel quiet, not because nothing changes, but because everything changes beneath the surface. Your old reactions dissolve. Your urgency fades. Your craving for validation softens. You no longer chase clarity. You become clarity. And in that clarity, life starts to shimmer again. Not with perfection, but with presence. Even your pain becomes more honest. It no longer feels like punishment. It feels like process, not a block on your path, but a gate through which the next version of you is waiting. And yet, there's something most people don't talk about. When you begin to live from presence, the old identities don't go quietly. The ego, once convinced it was in control, doesn't always dissolve with grace. Sometimes it flares up. It reasserts itself. It demands to be heard, to be praised, to be in charge. Don't fight it. Don't shame it. Greet it. Thank it. It was protecting you once. It was doing its best with limited tools. But now you have access to a deeper compass. One that doesn't yell. One that doesn't rush. One that doesn't panic. And when you choose that compass, moment by moment, the ego begins to trust you. It begins to soften, not through violence, but through invitation. That's what coherence really is. Not the absence of conflict, but the integration of all your parts into a single tone. You don't banish your shadow. You give it a place to rest. You don't escape your doubt. You listen to it without losing your center. And every time you do, your field becomes more whole. And a whole field, even if it's trembling, even if it's tired, sends a clearer signal than a divided one. So let's speak now of the next layer, entanglement. Not the romantic kind, though sometimes it looks like that. I mean quantum entanglement, the invisible threads that link us across time, space, lifetimes. Every person you've loved, even briefly. Every soul you've grieved. Every stranger who shifted your day without ever knowing. You are still connected, not in sentiment, but in signal. Your coherence touches theirs. And when you rise in awareness, when you heal without bitterness, when you love without demand, they feel it. Even if they don't know why. Even if they're on the other side of the world. Even if they've passed. The thread doesn't cut. It sings. This is why your inner work matters more than you think. Because you're not just healing your life. You're sending tremors through the web. You're tuning your part of the song. And when enough of us do that, when enough of us choose coherence over control, reality shifts. Not with headlines, but with harmonics. Not through revolution, but through revelation. Quiet, cellular, undeniable. Let me share a final subtle truth with you. The deepest shifts don't feel like explosions. They feel like remembrance. Like the soft click of something sliding back into place. You don't jump out of your chair and scream, "I get it." You exhale. You soften. You look at a tree and it looks back. You taste your coffee and it feels sacred. You hold someone's hand and it feels like you've known them across galaxies. That's what awakening actually feels like. Ordinary, intimate, undeniable dot. And when you live like this, not all the time, not perfectly, but sincerely, life changes texture. You start to move through the world differently. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You need less, but receive more. You judge less, but feel more alive. And people feel you, not as a role or a name or an identity, but as a tuning fork that steadies their own vibration. So let's end this part with a question wrapped in stillness. What if your whole life has been designed not to break you, but to remember through you? What if your heartbreaks were not detours, but initiations? What if your confusion was a chrysalis? And this moment, yes, this quiet, humble moment, is you beginning to unfold your wings? You're not waking up to become someone new. You're waking up to become someone true dot. So now you're here, not at the end of something, but at a new fold in the spiral. You may feel it as a hush, or a stirring, or a strange clarity that doesn't quite translate into words. That's okay. The truth you're touching isn't meant to be processed through thought alone. It's meant to be held like warm water in cupped hands. Let it sink into your bones without rushing to understand. Let your nervous system slowly trust that this presence is not going to vanish. Let your old selves, the hurried, the afraid, the performative, loosen their grip. You're not stepping into a better version of yourself. You're undoing the versions you built to survive. And underneath them, something breathtaking is already breathing. You've probably felt it more than once by now. That sense of walking through your life while watching from somewhere just behind your own eyes. That moment when you laugh, but feel a shadow of sadness woven through it. Or when someone says your name, and it feels both familiar and distant, like you're playing a character you forgot how to exit. That's not dissociation. That's awareness deepening. That's the part of you that lives beyond narrative, gently surfacing to remind you. You are not just the story. You are the one who watches. And when you witness without judgment, something subtle begins to occur. Life stops being about right or wrong, success or failure, gain or loss. It becomes texture, sensation, movement. You stop needing things to mean something in the usual way. Instead, you begin to feel their vibration. A conversation feels light or heavy. A path feels open or closed. A decision vibrates at your frequency or doesn't. It's not analysis anymore. It's attunement. Like tuning an old radio, not for music, but for truth. Most people live their lives adjusting to the static. But you're beginning to remember the signal. And as that signal sharpens, the world begins to move differently around you. Not because it changed, but because you did. You start to notice the way certain environments deplete you and others restore you. You begin to hear the lies that once convinced you. You stop apologizing for your intuition. Not because you've become louder, but because you've become clearer dot, and from that clarity, new choices rise. Not forced, not even deliberate, just obvious. You find yourself saying no to things you once tolerated. You walk away from conversations that no longer feed your soul. You stop bargaining with your own truth, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence. Because once you remember how sacred your coherence is, You stop offering it to things that don't sing it back. That's not selfish. That's energetic integrity. Let's talk now about sacred loneliness, the kind that follows an awakening. No one really prepares you for this part. The spaces that used to feel full now feel noisy. The friendships that once sparkled now feel dim. You're not broken. You're not cold. You're just tuned differently now. And while your field adjusts, while your new resonance calibrates, there can be a quiet ache. A feeling that maybe you've wandered too far from the familiar, that maybe you've lost something. But here's the truth. What you've lost wasn't loss. It was shedding. What remains will be real, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, new connections arrive, not with fireworks, with alignment. A glance that holds weight, a silence that feels safe, a shared stillness that speaks louder than shared interests. You begin to gather with those who don't need to be convinced of your worth, because they see you clearly, not as potential, not as promise, but as presence. And with them, coherence becomes communal. That's when healing accelerates. That's when growth feels less like struggle and more like unfolding. These people, your soul resonators, won't always look like you. They won't always speak your language, but you'll know them by the way your nervous system exhales in their presence. And you'll no longer need to explain yourself, because your frequency does the speaking. You don't need to be interesting. You just need to be real. Let's return now to the idea of being a tuning fork, not a preacher, not a seeker, just a being in coherence, whose presence subtly retunes the world. You don't need a stage for this. You don't need a title. You don't need to fix anyone. In fact, the more you stop trying to change people, the more they begin to shift in your presence. Not because you did anything, but because your field made something possible. That's the sacred paradox. When you let go of the need to save, you become a space where healing happens. When you stop demanding answers, they arrive. When you surrender the script, life begins to improvise with astonishing precision. Because you've stopped trying to command the universe and started conversing with it. You listen, you feel, you respond. You trust. And trust, let's name this clearly, doesn't mean you're always comfortable. Trust means you stay with yourself, even when you're not. Trust means you remember that discomfort isn't the end, it's the edge. And if you lean in gently, if you breathe instead of bracing, something always meets you there. Sometimes it's a truth. Sometimes it's a release. Sometimes it's just the sensation of being held by something vaster than logic. Because at the core of all this, the remembering, the coherence, the frequency, the quiet magic is one simple truth. You are not alone. Not in the spiritual cliché sense, but in the quantum, biological, lived sense. Every breath you take is part of a larger inhale. Every pulse of longing is an echo from another heart. You are entangled, not trapped, but woven. And the more you live as if that's true, the more the world begins to respond in kind. So breathe. Now, with reverence. Breathe not to fix, not to force, but to remember. Let your inhale be a declaration. I am here. Let your exhale be a surrender. And I am held. Let the space between breaths become a doorway to everything else. Because it is. And if you're wondering what comes next, don't rush. Don't grasp. Let this be the kind of story that ends without a neat bow, because you are the continuation. You are the spiral that keeps unfolding. You are the rhythm echoing into new choices, new timelines, new signals waiting to bloom. Ask yourself gently, what would life feel like if I fully trusted the tone I carry? Then live from that question. Let it shape your days the way tides shape shores, slowly, steadily, with quiet inevitability. You don't need to do more. You only need to remember what moves through you when you stop trying to be anything else. You are not seeking a path, you are revealing one with every step. And in that soft stride forward, something sacred waits, not ahead of you. Within you, you've made it further than most do, not in distance, but in presence. There's no reward at this point, no badge, no fanfare. Just this, the sound of your own breath landing more honestly in your chest. That's what integration begins to feel like. Not fireworks, but gravity. Not enlightenment as an escape from life, but as a return to it with new eyes. You're not reaching for the stars anymore. You've become the sky they rest in. They, vastness you once imagined as out there, now hums beneath your skin, quietly, steadily, as if it had always belonged. And maybe it did. Maybe you were always a frequency in search of its own echo. And now you hear it in birdsong, in your footsteps, in the pause between words. This stage, this phase of remembering is not dramatic. It's devotional. You begin to treat small things with reverence. The way you pour water. The way you pause before speaking. The sensation of your fingers brushing a doorframe. This isn't performance. It's not ritual for ritual's sake. It's simply the consequence of waking up inside the moment. You no longer need to manufacture magic. You see it in the way the sunlight bleeds across the floor, in the way your heartbeat aligns with a song you didn't mean to hear, in the way the silence inside you holds space like a cathedral. You don't need to be anywhere else. You don't need to be anyone else. This is coherence, lived, and yet you'll still forget. You'll still fall back into noise. The world is persistent, after all, full of urgency, illusion, invitations. To abandon yourself, you will get pulled, you will stumble. But the difference now is, you return faster. You notice sooner. The forgetting doesn't last as long. You don't punish yourself for slipping. You just breathe and come back. That's the new strength. Not perfection, but return. The skill is in remembering how to remember. And that, too, is enough. Let's talk now about the body, the often overlooked cathedral of awakening. For all our longing to ascend, the truth is this. Your body is the frequency filter. It's not in the way, it's the way. When you ground awareness into your flesh, not bypassing pain, but feeling through it, you open the deepest portals. The cells themselves remember. The bones themselves hum. And when you move with awareness, even your walk changes. You begin to feel like you are being walked by something deeper, not directed, expressed. The field walks itself through you, and so you eat differently. Not for purity, but for presence. You rest differently, not to escape, but to recharge the field. You touch differently, speak differently, not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because your nervous system now requires integrity to remain in coherence. You can't pretend like you used to. You can't sit in falseness without your skin buzzing with dissonance. This is not discomfort as flaw. It's sensitivity as compass. Your awareness is now woven through your body. And it listens with your skin as you live this way. Something else softens. The fear of time. You no longer race the clock. You stop measuring your worth by what you've accomplished in a day. You begin to trust the rhythm of things, that ideas arrive when they're ready, that healing unfolds in its own time, that there is nothing noble about urgency. You move slower, you speak less, you listen more, and the irony is, more gets done, not through hustle, but through harmony. Because now you're moving with the current of your field, not against it. You'll start noticing how often people still live in resistance to their own truth. How often they posture, defend, strive to be perceived instead of received. And you won't judge them. You'll feel for them, because you were once there too. And sometimes you still are. But now, instead of reacting, you'll anchor. You'll become a calm in the room, and your presence will begin to do the work that your words never could. You won't need to convince. You'll just breathe, and others will find themselves breathing. This is coherence as service, not as performance, but as quiet revolution. You become the frequency that helps others remember theirs. Not because you told them anything, but because your field made remembering feel safe. And when they cry in front of you, when they collapse, into laughter, when they confess their longings, don't be surprised. You didn't cause it. You permitted it, simply by being anchored in yourself. So what now? What's left after awakening begins to settle. After the clarity stops feeling like an event and starts becoming your default setting, you become a walker of two worlds. One foot in the unseen, listening, attuning. One foot in the practical, living, creating, doing dishes, paying bills. You don't separate the sacred and the mundane anymore. You infuse the mundane with the sacred. You pray while folding laundry. You meditate while chopping onions. You bless while brushing your teeth, not out loud, just with presence, just by not leaving, and others feel it. They don't always know what it is, but they feel more alive around you, more seen, more safe. You're not special. You're just clear. You're not better. You're just true. And your truth is a lighthouse. Quiet, steady, offering direction without demand. And this is how worlds change. So let's pause here at this soft summit and look gently back. All the versions of you who doubted, who despaired, who begged for signs, they're still with you, not as weight, as witnesses. They saw you through the threshold. They carried your longing. They lit the match. And now you carry the torch, not with triumph, but with tenderness. Because you know the terrain now. You know the cracks. You know the silence. And you don't fear them anymore. Here. At this point, you stop asking what the universe wants from you. And you start living as if the universe is living through you. Each action becomes aligned. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're tuned enough to feel when something's true. That's your compass now. Not logic, not approval, not outcome. Truth. And when you're asked, how do you know? You won't point to a theory. You'll touch your heart, or your belly, or the silence you heard between two thoughts. You'll say, I don't know how I know. I just remember. This is what it means to live from your field, not as escape, not as concept, but as reality. It's the softest way to live, and the most powerful. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering how to live as someone true. You're not chasing the divine. You're embodying it. And every time you choose that, in traffic, in conversation, in solitude, the field listens. And it sings back. By now, you may have noticed something even stranger. It's not that life has stopped being difficult. It's that your relationship to difficulty has transformed. The old triggers still arise, but something beneath them holds you differently now. It's not numbness. It's not denial. It's a soft presence, like a warm palm on your back reminding you, this too is allowed. You no longer flinch from pain. You meet it, you name it, and you listen to what it's asking of you. That's the shift. You no longer demand that pain go away. You ask it what it needs. And slowly, the world begins to change, not through lightning bolts, but through how you carry yourself. You no longer speak just to be heard. You speak when your voice rings true. You no longer reach just to fix. You reach because connection itself is sacred. Your life stops being a transaction. It becomes a transmission. And others, without knowing why, feel more alive in your presence. Not because you perform, because you resonate. You walk through grocery stores like a tuning fork. You sit in traffic like a node of stillness. You cry in the shower not as collapse, but as clearing. You begin to realize that everything, every conversation, every frustration, every glance exchanged with a stranger is part of the field remembering itself. You are no longer trying to ascend out of the world. You are learning how to inhabit it fully, with a frequency that shifts it gently from within. This is the real spiritual work. Not escaping form, but infusing it with presence. Not climbing some invisible ladder toward enlightenment, but anchoring. Deeper into the body, into the moment, into the breath that speaks louder than belief. The paradox is that the more awake you become, the simpler your life becomes. And also, the more mysterious. You stop asking big cosmic questions, not because you've lost curiosity, but because now you are the question. Your life itself becomes the inquiry. Each moment a test of integrity. Each interaction a mirror of tone dot. Now something else opens. Not a truth, but a responsibility. The field is always listening. But now that you know it listens, how will you speak? Now that you know every thought hums out into the network, how carefully will you shape it? Not with paranoia, not with control, but with reverence. Because now you know, your vibration is not private. Your inner coherence doesn't stay contained. It ripples. Your grief ripples. Your healing ripples. Your stillness ripples. And that means that your quietest work, the moment you choose forgiveness, the moment you let go of old blame, the moment you speak with love instead of pride, that work shifts more than just your own timeline. It alters the frequency map of the whole. You don't need to see it to know it's real. You feel it. When a stranger looks at you longer than expected, when someone softens after speaking to you, when a child smiles at you without prompting, that's the field responding. That's coherence meeting coherence. That's how we build new worlds, not with new governments or new slogans, but with new frequencies. And that frequency isn't something you broadcast on purpose. It's what you become when you stop performing, when you stop striving, when you drop into your actual body and stop pretending that you're behind or late or broken. When you live as if the moment is complete, even in sadness, even in loss. That's the medicine. That's what the old mystics meant when they said God is in the details. Not in the concept, in the noticing, in the breath. In the sip of tea, let's talk about the shadow again. Because it's still here, always is. Awareness doesn't delete it. It just changes how you meet it. And now, instead of fearing your darkness, you sit with it. You hold its hand. You stop demanding that it behave. You learn to listen to the hurt beneath the anger, to the longing beneath the judgment. And in doing so, the shadow softens. Not because it's been conquered, but because it's been seen that this is the gentlest revolution. To meet what is, without flinching, without spinning a story, without turning away. That's the real coherence. That's how fields heal. So how do you live now? You move slower. You apologize quicker. You take up space when it's true. And you retreat when silence serves better. Celebrate without needing attention. You grieve without needing rescue. You let yourself be human, tender, open, inconsistent. And in doing so, the divine becomes real. Not as perfection, but as permission. And you begin to share what you know. Not as doctrine, not as evangelism, but as presence. When someone asks you how you stay calm, you don't give them a formula. You just look them in the eyes and say, I listen more now. And somehow that lands. They nod. They feel it. They don't need your steps. They need your stillness. Because the truth is, most people don't need to be told what's true. They already know. They just need to be near someone who lives like it matters. That's your work now. Not to teach. To be. To embody. You are not here to create followers. You are here to remember how to follow your own resonance, moment by moment. And if that inspires others, good. If it doesn't, good. Because you're not here to manage outcomes anymore. You're here to maintain coherence and to let the outcomes bloom from that. You're starting to feel it now, aren't you? That you don't need to chase meaning anymore. You are the meaning, just as you are. Not when you're polished. Not when you're perfect. Right now, in your body, in your breath, there will be more initiations, more challenges, more chances to forget. That's fine. That's life. That's the spiral doing its sacred work. But now you know how to return. You've trained for this. And more importantly, you've remembered Dot. So let's end this part not with answers, but with an invitation. Live like your field matters. Walk like your vibration shapes the path. Speak like the universe is listening. Through every syllable. And love, not as escape, but as anchoring. The spiral continues. The breath continues, Dot, and through it all, you remain. The pulse, the presence, the permission. You remember. You return. You ripple. You are more visible now, not because the world sees you with its eyes, but because the field recognizes your tone. It's strange at first. People seem to respond to you before you speak. They make confessions at crosswalks. They linger longer in conversation. Their shoulders drop when you arrive. You haven't done anything dramatic. You've simply become undeniable to the field. Your presence no longer hides behind masks or roles. You walk with coherence. And coherence speaks a language that all things, animals, wind, silence, time understand. But this kind of visibility isn't always comfortable. It brings with it a new kind of accountability, not to others, to yourself. You can no longer pretend that your energy doesn't matter. You feel the difference between presence and performance. You sense when your actions match your truth and when they echo old stories. And while others might not notice, you do. Your awareness won't let you abandon yourself like it used to. That's the gift and the weight of walking as a remembered being. Dot. Sometimes it aches. You miss the old distractions. You crave the comfort of unconsciousness. There's a simplicity in living from reaction, from default, from roles that don't ask for depth. But you've tasted something else now, and that taste lingers. You know too much. You feel too much. You've seen behind the curtain, and pretending it was just a dream won't work anymore. So you keep showing up, not because it's easy, but because it's true. There are moments, even now, where it all feels invisible. You show up with clarity, and the world shrugs. You move with kindness, and no one seems to notice. You embody presence, and chaos still erupts around you. And in those moments, the old voice returns. Does it even matter? But here's this deeper knowing rising from beneath. Yes, Dot, because you are not living for applause. You are living as resonance. And resonance does not need to be witnessed to be real. It shapes the fabric of things from underneath, like roots in soil, like gravity, like breath. The future, your future, is already listening. Every time you choose presence, it gets softer. Every time you hold truth in your chest, instead of outsourcing it for comfort, the timeline shifts. You won't always see it instantly. That's part of the training. You're learning to trust the ripples you can't yet measure, to offer presence without proof, to become medicine without needing a thank you. And then, sometimes, the feedback comes not as reward, but as recognition. A friend tells you, I feel safe around you. A stranger says, you don't talk like most people. Someone cries in your presence and says they don't know why. These are echoes. These are the field nodding back at you, gently, with tears in its eyes. Let's talk softly now about time. Not as hours and days, but as memory folded into motion. Time, in the quantum field, is not linear. It loops. It layers. The version of you reading this now has already been dreamt by a past self that was aching for clarity. And the version of you waiting in the future, freer, clearer, more whole, is already pulsing this signal back toward you. Every choice you make in alignment strengthens that loop. Every time you listen to the nudge instead of the noise, you bridge the timelines. You are not marching toward the future. You are harmonizing with it. That this is why patience becomes easier. You stop measuring by what's arrived. You begin listening for what's resonating. You feel timelines drawing near, possibilities whispering from the edges, and you stop demanding immediate evidence. You feel the shift in your bones, in your breath. You trust that what is becoming real has already begun, even if the form hasn't landed yet. That's when service becomes effortless. You're not trying to help. You are help. Not in doing, in being. You listen without inserting advice. You witness without fixing. You hold space, not as a strategy, but as your nature. And people begin to transform in your presence, not dramatically, not theatrically, but authentically. They soften, they reconsider, they awaken not, and you don't take credit. You don't turn it into a story. You simply thank the field. You bow inward. You say, yes, I'm listening. And then you keep walking, softer, clearer, anchored. There's a new kind of joy rising now. It doesn't come from achievement or celebration. It comes from congruence, from knowing that your inner and outer self are starting to sing the same song, from feeling your own yes in your spine, from noticing that you no longer abandon your own energy to make others more comfortable. That joy? It's quieter, but it lasts longer, and it builds a home. Inside you. Now, the world looks different. Not perfect, not fair, but alive, communicative. The trees feel like they're leaning closer. The sky winks. The birds fly overhead like blessings. Traffic feels less personal. Delays become invitations. Even your own emotions feel like guests, not intruders. You greet your sadness now. You say, you're welcome here. You greet your anger. You say, what are you protecting? You greet your confusion. You say, let's walk slowly together. This is you, not mastering your emotions, but maturing with them. They become less of a battlefield, more of a choir. Sometimes dissonant, sometimes harmonic, but always human, always real, always part of your field's full, beautiful frequency. And now, finally, you can rest, not as escape, as return, as alignment. You sleep differently. You wake differently. Even your dreams start to change. They stop shouting. They begin showing. They become conversations with your own consciousness, subtle, surreal, instructive. You stop dismissing them. You start listening. You start weaving your dreaming and waking worlds together. Because why separate them? They're both fields. They're both expressions. They both speak in symbols. And now that you're fluent in feeling, you can understand them in ways you never could before. This is not the end of the spiral, but it is a threshold. One you've crossed gently, silently, and now you carry the resonance of someone who has remembered something sacred and can never again fully forget. You walk differently now, not because the world changed, but because you did. You speak differently, not with better words, but with deeper silence behind them. You love differently, not with effort, but with essence. This is what happens when coherence becomes home. You don't arrive somewhere. You become someone. And now we pause, not to conclude, but to let the silence speak. Nothing final is needed here. Only the soft remembering that you are the signal, not the seeker. The path you've been walking wasn't leading you anywhere else. It was returning you to the quiet coherence that's been waiting in your chest all along. You've tasted the stillness beneath thought. You've felt the field lean closer. And now, even the ordinary carries that sacred shimmer. Let yourself rest here, not in answers, but in resonance. Let your breath be the bridge, your presence, the prayer You are not behind. You are not lost. You are exactly where the frequency needed you to be. Other stories are waiting, and so are other moments of remembering. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again next time in another spiral, another breath, another homecoming.